my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Monday, November 13th. Today we have a weekly wrap-up. I figured I would try this for now, just so I can keep getting videos out there, sharing what's going on. It's been a little tricky to do every day lately, so we have our first weekly wrap-up. Probably start posting these on Friday, but it is Monday, and with that said, let's just kick in and get started anyway. Story number one here is that now only the Federal Reserve owns more U.S. debt than China. Again, putting in perspective how much of what the U.S. spends is financed just by printing it. I mean, here you see it's 2.5 trillion versus 1.2 for China. Of course, Japan also coming in there with over $1 trillion of securities. With the main takeaway being that, again, you can hear the Fed talk about normalizing interest rates, unwinding its balance sheet, but, okay, if they do that, who is going to buy the 2.5 trillion? Certainly, China gives you every indication they're walking away, and in fact, in one of our other stories here this week, something that I've expected for a while, perhaps also explains when people wonder, all right, the gold bugs have been talking about inflation for almost a decade now, and still things are kind of normal. But I mean, essentially, a lot of these dollars have been exported through the treasuries. So China's buying all these treasuries, and you kept getting the indication that at some point, well, they'd want to cash in these dollars while they still have value. So certainly buying a lot of gold, precious metals, miners. And, I just found it interesting that here, China's Sovereign Wealth Fund planning to invest up to $5 billion in U.S. investments where, well, if you have these dollars, you got to use them for something because it's becoming more and more clear. We had another debt ceiling limit come up, of course, pushed off a couple months. And when a couple months come, probably you have the same thing go down then as well. So also fascinating that they chose Goldman Sachs as their investment banker to do some of the multi-billion-dollar deals. Maybe not who I would have picked, but in either case, good luck with that. Although I'm sure in the end, they'll end up picking up some assets. So just stunning to see that the entire globe, major buyer of debt, again, the Fed, and then China looks like they're continuing to cash in while they can. And certainly you can't blame them, because here was another wild one, that there's a report going around that now there's $21 trillion in undocumentable adjustments. This was by Catherine Austin Fitz, who you may be familiar with, does a lot of good research. And here, to discuss his recent report on what is now $21 trillion in undocumentable adjustments at the Department of Defense between 1998 and 2015. Now, certainly I know perhaps the logical first reaction is to think, all right, these guys must have gotten something wrong. Although, again, keep in mind, this has happened before. In case you aren't aware, oddly enough, on September 10th, 2001, yes, the day before the World Trade Center attack, Donald Rumsfeld, which you can watch and see for yourself, announced that the Pentagon had lost I'm giggling because I was listening to Jeff Berwick over the weekend, and he calls it the pentagram, which I think is kind of funny. So in either case, they announced, and it's actually pretty stunning. I won't play it for you now, but you can see, you can YouTube it. When Rumsfeld just basically says 2.3 trillion's gone, we don't know what happened. And of course, I'm told through the internet that the section of the government that would have been responsible for auditing that missing money happened to be in the section of the Pentagon that exploded the next day. So either case, what's really stunning, though, going back to the missing 21 trillion, is that if there's actually that missing 21 trillion, what does that say about the money supply? I mean, just if there's 21 trillion missing, are we now accepting perhaps that the numbers out of the Fed, I mean, if the Fed's balance sheet is 4 trillion, and God only knows how you would properly account for this, but I mean, essentially, just even that you would be thinking that we could be looking at a multiple of 5 in the money supply, which, if accurate, and God only knows, my guess is that there's, whether 21 trillion is the exact number or how you would actually compare that in equivalent terms to the monetary base. In either case, you just see how we're not talking about little rounding errors here anymore. And that's why, I mean, that's why the markets are being propped up. That's why there's so much central bank and just regular bank manipulation and intervention. And certainly a great reason like gold or silver, or certainly the crypto space if you know how to pick the right ones, because it's, well, I would say that would be the most emblematic sign of how ridiculous things have become. Yet stay tuned, it gets better. So taking a look over here, probably you've heard in the past week, wild things happening in the Saudi Arabian kingdom, which, while my dad was actually born in Egypt, I'm not going to attempt to reconcile the whole Mideast conflict, but certainly when you see all the news coming out about the Petrodollar, which certainly is one of those staples underpinning the Western financial system. In fact, I remember even back when I was still on the New York Stock Exchange and starting to see this alternate perspective of how the markets should be working, or the things that are going on behind the scenes that I would argue have not been priced in yet, and thinking what could be the spark that could one day bring about a fracture in the dollar. Certainly, I've wondered over times, maybe something like the petrodollar collapsing, and I can't say we're certain of that at this point, although it was interesting. This was, I believe, last Sunday night, and then I wake up Monday morning, find out here, Saudi prince killed in, I'm going to say no to that pop up there, but killed in a helicopter crash near Yemen border. Again, I wouldn't claim to have the first clue exactly what was the cause of that crash. Although just to the degree that if you're familiar with Jonathan Perkins, author of Economic Hitman, there certainly is a precedent for foreign leaders having planes or helicopters crash. Really interesting book you might want to check out, by the way. It will change your perspective on a lot of these things. So it's just stunning that all these things happening at the same time, perhaps even more so if you've been hearing about a lot of these things over the past year or so, which have been floating around out there, and now seeing them take place. Not unrelated is that now if you Google PetroYuan, a term which I heard for the first time in the past week, of course it was always the petrodollar, but just even that, it's a new term being introduced into our cultural lexicon. Will the PetroYuan save GLD? Rise of the PetroYuan. You can see these are all pretty new articles, although PetroYuan already up to 130,000 results. And my guess is, based on our last story of the week, that number is probably going to grow, because something certainly we've heard about the WikiLeaks, the email servers, and rumors of all sorts of things. Although for whatever reason, the way I heard it last week, there was a great interview with Dr. Dave Janda, who was on Greg Hunter's USA Watchdog, which, man, I highly recommend. Because amongst some other bombshells, it finally sank into me that, and I would say, at least as much as these things can be confirmed, and you can by all means, don't take my word for it, but as bizarre as it sounds, apparently the Clintons had a side deal to sell uranium to Russia, which, I mean, where do you even begin with that one? It's like growing up with years of the Cold War and, Russia as the boogeyman, and we find out, I mean, we knew the political system was corrupted and these guys are selling things out to make money any way they can, but again, I mean, don't take my word for it. Do your own research here, although my understanding is that this, amongst a lot of the other events that are happening now, are going to be much more widely known and revealed and exposed. A quick excerpt here. The Uranium One scandal, in which the Obama administration approved a deal that handed a Russian-controlled corporation 20% of America's uranium reserves, despite the existence of an FBI investigation. By now, we're sure that most of our readers are well aware that Obama's approval of the Uranium One deal seemingly landed the Clinton Foundation $145 million in donations. And it goes on, as you can see here. So, again, go do your own research on this one, although I feel pretty comfortable that you're going to be hearing a lot more about this one. And when you see the market in the cryptos continuing to accelerate, there's a connection between the two, where as much as there may be some speculation in the cryptos, I think a lot of that speculation is that it's an anti-dollar trade. We're seeing the deep state crumble, which personally I think is good news for anyone who's into freedom and such glorious things. Not that it's good news to find out some of the things that have been going on. Unfortunately, I continue to hear more and more about these pedophile scandals that involve the politicians, Hollywood, and God knows who else. So certainly a lot of this information is disturbing and unfortunate, yet to the degree that at least I think we're seeing a big sea of change, of transparency and accountability, which certainly is needed in politics. Certainly it'll be great for the financial markets, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the movement in the crypto space, which I think we'll see similar things in the precious metal space one day, maybe not today or tomorrow, although I think we're heading there. So with that said, hope you enjoyed the weekly wrap up. We'll see you again. I'm going to aim for Friday, and leave your comments below. I'd love to know what questions are on your mind. And with that said, go out and have a great week. We'll see you soon.